Here stands a true gamer prodigy, skills sharp as a blade, only flaw. A mouth that runs faster than his reflexes. Just as he's about to unleash his ultimate move, fate throws him a curveball. A mysterious girl named Flona appears seeking his help. And, with a heart racing for a girl who in their right mind would say no, they sit together chatting deep into the moment where he reveals he's a man of responsibility, not just in games, but in life itself. That's when Flona spills her secret she needs his help. In the real world, his heart leaps, nearly 20 years single, and now finally, he might just taste what having a girlfriend feels like. Flona hopes he'll come through, promising something precious in return. Curious, he asks where they'll meet, and she says soon. Then, out of nowhere, he's plunged into a strange new world, a realm where a swordsman is sworn to protect a fleeing princess. But danger lurks, modern tanks roar in pursuit, unleashing soldiers to encircle them. The swordsman and his comrades stand firm, shielding the princess. Yet the enemy commander swiftly wipes out all but the swordsman and the princess. Recognizing the swordsman as a sword saint, the commander offers mercy, his life spared if he surrenders the princess. Refusing, the swordsman prepares for a duel. Suddenly, our gamer's chair crashes down, striking the commander's head. Quick-witted, the swordsman grabs the princess and flees, but she insists he saves the gamer too. Turning back, the swordsman throws a rope, pulling the gamer into their escape. Questions flood the air. Who is he? Where did he come from? What was that blinding light when he appeared? But the gamer's own question cuts deeper. Where is this place? A strange name rings out, and he wonders if this is a dream. Suddenly, a girl punches him hard, snapping him back to reality. He tries to fight back, but is stopped. This fierce girl is Princess Pyria herself. He refuses to believe such a violent kid could be royalty. She might look like the girl he met, but this is Maria, the princess's maid, and she's no girl but a shape-shifting creature. To prove it, Maria even invites him to check under her skirt, shattering his already fragile trust in this crazy world. Lost and confused, he meets other odd companions. Meanwhile, the blue-haired soldier reports failure to his commander, the mission lost due to some unknown stranger dropping from the sky and hitting him on the head. The commander, feeling blindsided, wants to test who could catch his man off guard like that. The gamer learns the princess is being escorted to a neighbouring kingdom for a political marriage to unite the lands. The attackers, rebels seeking to disrupt this fragile peace. Though he guessed the princess was older, she's just 8 years old, too young for such burdens. He feels the injustice deeply, but the princess insists she's fine. Grateful and eager to repay them, he decides to ask for a pair of shoes. The group heads into town, entering a shop where everyone picks out the wildest shoes imaginable for him. Not holding back, he chooses the most expensive badass pair in the store. Suddenly, the swordsman senses they're being tailed and signals the gamer to prepare to run. They dash into an alley, ambushing 2 pursuers. A fierce battle breaks out. Maria steps up to fight while the gamer stays behind to guard the princess. The group braces, ready for whatever comes next. He followed his path down into the sewers, finally crawling out at the city's edge. But something felt off, no guards in sight. Impatient and curious, he dashed out to investigate and called the others to follow. Yet no sooner had they stepped out than the enemy commander appeared, Eric. Stronger than any foe he'd faced before. Eric, the very man he had defeated before. Maria stepped forward to confront him. Eric, brimming with confidence, activated his sword, sending both Maria and him flying with a single devastating strike. He even slashed at him, knocking him down. Disappointed, Eric had expected more strength from him. Then he advanced toward the princess. But he refused to stay down, rising again with unyielding spirit. Impressed by his determination, Eric unleashed a more powerful attack. Just as the move was about to land, he kicked Eric straight in the groin, rendering him unconscious. Seizing the moment, he led the group to safety. Who would have thought he could take down a beast like Eric? To him, defeating a fierce enemy like Eric felt almost routine. He even swiped Eric's impressive sword for future use. Princess Pyria then made a bold decision. From now on, he would be her knight. Resistance was not an option. She warned that any refusal would be met with harsh consequences. Yet he was determined to refuse at all costs. He had no desire to become this princess's servant. Days later, Eric regained consciousness painfully, recalling the crushing kick. doctors delivered grim news one of Eric's jewels had to be removed, a bitter blow that fueled his thirst for revenge against him. Meanwhile, he kept complaining about being forced to serve the princess, despite it being a royal decree. He believed his true mission was finding a way back to his original world. But Upheld Len argued he had no leads on that journey yet, suggesting he stick with their group for now. The princess promised to provide food and clothing if he served her, but he refused, clinging to his pride. No one stopped him from leaving, because Upheld wanted them to keep moving toward the capital, while avoiding rebel forces at all costs. Back in the ranks, Eric returned, and everyone believed he was sabotaged to explain his defeat. But the more his subordinates spoke, the paler Eric grew, his steps wobbling humorously. Meanwhile, he sat listening to music when Maria suddenly appeared. It was hard to tell if Maria was a him, or her Maria wanted him to accompany her for a while. Maria asked if he felt uncomfortable travelling with them. He wasn't exactly hostile, just hated being treated like a mere servant. She led him to a massive pigeon messenger station, an impressive sight. Maria wanted to call for backup to ensure a safer journey to the kingdom. Meanwhile, Eric met with his superiors, knowing he had to capture the princess soon and reclaim his sword from him. Confident that he wouldn't know how to wield the sword, he and Upheld started experimenting with the weapon. They discovered it had a trigger and a sphere beneath it designed to absorb and channel energy. Upheld squeezed the trigger and swung the sword, but it behaved like any ordinary blade. However, he noticed the stone was valuable and tried to remove it to sell. Suddenly, the princess appeared, asking him to accompany her. Together, they climbed a watchtower where she revealed the peaceful landscape she was sworn to protect. If she couldn't partake in the arranged marriage war would likely erupt. She was ready to sacrifice her youth to save the world and wanted him to help guard her. But the problem was he had no special power. Both times he saved her, it was pure luck. At that moment, Eric rolled in with a tank to assault the city, forcing him to reveal himself. The green-haired man was also searching for him in the narrow alleys. He reunited with Upheld, and they realized that fleeing now would doom the town. Suddenly, a bomb was dropped at their feet, forcing them to scatter. Bad luck struck again as he found himself face to face with Eric. Eric aimed his cannon, but missed, accidentally hitting his own men on the rooftop. He realized his aim was off due to imbalance, and fired again, still missing. Upheld decided to clear a path for him to fight, believing he could somehow master the sword. Upheld charged forward, dodging bullets and slicing a tank tread. He activated the sword in a strange way, but it transformed into a stone mace, throwing him off balance. He picked himself up and charged again, smashing the tank to pieces. Eric wasn't defeated yet and stepped out for another fight. He noticed Eric's unsteady gait was a result of his earlier kick, so he stood still, letting Eric miss his attacks. Then, he dealt a final blow to Eric's other side, leaving him stunned and unconscious. Eric's men decided to retreat, promising a future rematch. He vowed to help the princess's group, but only if they helped him return to his world. She agreed and told him to head to the capital, a place not far from their current location. A girl had been watching their group and sent her flying squirrel messenger to approach him. Curious, he wondered if he could find a way back once in the capital. It was uncertain, but clues were sure to be there. The group encountered the flying squirrel, and both Upheld and Maria found it adorable, wanting to keep it as a pet. But he adamantly refused, insisting they shouldn't disrupt nature's order. Wild creatures belonged in the wild, where they could grow strong. He laid out a mountain of reasons to stop them from adopting it, and then shooed it away. That night, while he slept, the creature found its way into his room. Morning came with a start as he discovered the flying squirrel had returned. Despite his shouts and attempts to chase it off, Maria calmly reached out and decided to keep it no matter his objections. He realized that the way he moved was the consequence of the kick he received earlier, so he stood still, letting his opponent lose balance and miss his strike. Determined to fix this imbalance, he landed a final blow on the other side, causing the enemy to writhe in pain and fall unconscious. Eric's subordinate decided it was time to retreat once again. They backed off, promising to meet again next time. After they left, he decided to help the princess's group, but in return they had to find a way to send him back to his original world. She agreed, and told him he needed to travel to the capital with her, which wasn't far from where her group was. A girl had been watching and following their group closely. She sent her flying squirrel, her personal messenger, to approach him, curious about whether he could really return after reaching the capital. It was a gamble, but she was certain the capital held some clue. When the group met the flying squirrel, both he and Maria found it so cute they wanted to keep it as a pet. But the squirrel firmly refused, insisting they shouldn't disrupt the natural order like that. Wild creatures belong in the wild, surviving on their own to grow strong. He came up with a bunch of excuses to stop them from adopting it, then sent it away. That night, while he was asleep, the creature found its way into his room. The next morning, he jumped up in shock when the flying squirrel appeared again. Though he tried to scare it off, Maria reached out and embraced it, vowing to care for the little creature no matter what, whether he liked it or not. He kept imagining the worst possible scenarios of keeping the creature around, but Maria remained steadfast. She even shared a legendary tale about a hero, how grand his story was, until he revealed the hero loved cats. That made the whole story sound ridiculous to him. Yet upon hearing this, he reluctantly agreed to keep the squirrel. It was 2 against 1, and the princess sided with the other 2. He swore to never get along with this little beast. Later, he went out to buy some gear for hunting, refusing to believe that a top server like him couldn't catch a tiny wild creature. When asked what he planned to do, he simply said he was going hunting. Back in his room, he grabbed a net to catch the flying squirrel, but Maria pointed a gun at him, demanding to know his intentions. Undeterred, he brewed a poison potion to trick the squirrel, but the princess caught him and insisted he try it first to prove it was safe. She then called a meeting with the group, asking why he hated the flying squirrel so much. Reluctantly, he confessed he was allergic to pets, but no one saw any reaction when he was near the squirrel. Everyone urged him to stop making excuses. So he shared a childhood story. On a rainy day, he found 2 abandoned cats and kindly took them in. But when everyone heard this, had seen him near that squirrel with no problem, so they all pressured him to give a real reason. He finally shared a childhood memory. On a rainy day, he found 2 abandoned kittens and kindly took them in. Yet everyone listening, curiosity filled their eyes as they wondered what tragic fate had befallen those kittens. Did they fall ill and perish? His family opposed his efforts to care for them, but his resentment wasn't towards the kittens. Rather, it stemmed from the fact that despite his love, he never received their affection in return. This revelation sparked a glimmer of hope among them, as they believed it might be a chance for him to change his perspective. Unsure if he truly could, he reluctantly reached out to the chipmunk, only to have it bite his hand, igniting a fiery rage within him. He sought to drive it away, challenging it to a duel. If he lost, he would let it stay out of sight, but if it lost, it would have to vanish from his view. Maria, urging him to show bravery, suggested a deal with the chipmunk. He agreed to let it stay if it could best him in a fight. He swung his hammer wildly, causing chaos and destruction. Despite pleas from others to ease up, he ignored them. The chipmunk lunged at him, scratching him as he swung aimlessly, unable to land a hit. Just as he cornered it against the wall, it deftly leapt, knocking him out cold. Defeated, he had to accept the chipmunk as part of their group, although he still fantasized about a chance to make it his meal if the opportunity arose. Their journey ahead was anything but smooth, with the chipmunk and him constantly bickering. They realized it was time to name the chipmunk, but with silly suggestions flying around, he insisted that the name must be thoughtful and, above all, 4 syllables long. If no proper name was given, he would simply call it Pet. No one objected much, and they continued their journey. Meanwhile, Eric brought the blue-haired girl back to his mansion. Upon their arrival, he was reunited with his fiancée, who had heard the rumours of Eric's disgrace on the battlefield. Little did she know he had lost 2 precious jewels as well, which would surely break her heart even more. Once inside, his fiancée approached him, wanting to treat his wounds. Fear gripped him, revealing the loss of his most treasured possessions would mean losing her forever. He resolved to hide the truth at all costs, but his refusal to accept her help left her feeling somewhat dejected. As Eric prepared to leave with the blue-haired girl, the butler noticed his fiancée's sadness. Not wanting her to feel lonely, Eric invited her to join him for a scenic ride. While riding, Eric's mind raced with thoughts of what would happen if he revealed the truth to her. He feared she would be disappointed and abandon him. During a camping trip by the lake, his fiancée asked how many children he wanted in the future. Her question pierced his heart, for he wondered if he could ever have a family in his current state. Though he wished to avoid the topic, she seemed to think he meant something else entirely. Eric, a child of fate, found himself torn between destiny and his own will. Yet a pang in his heart urged him to seek answers from the heavens about how to respond to his fiancée. Noticing his unusual demeanour, his fiancée asked the azure-haired girl where Eric was hurt. The girl, with a heavy heart, revealed the name of the one who had brought Eric to this state, as well as the circumstances of his defeat that fateful afternoon. On his way back, Eric encountered two familiar faces, Limpus and Ella. Concerned upon hearing about Eric's injury, Ella gifted him a box of traditional medicine, assuring him that it would only require a simple drink to heal. Eric, grateful, accepted her gift, unaware that it only deepened his fiancée's sorrow. The azure-haired girl, curious about the duo, inquired with the butler, who revealed that they were distant relatives of Eric. Limpus then instructed the butler to prepare a feast for the evening. But Limpus and Ella had darker intentions. The medicine they provided was a stimulant, and Ella's role was to seduce Eric, intending to tarnish his family's reputation. Meanwhile, Limpus planned to exploit this situation to win over Eric's fiancée and marry her. Later, Ella brought the medicine to Eric and coaxed him to lie on the bed, clad only in her undergarments, as she began to entwine herself around him. However, Eric pushed her away only for Limpus to burst in and create a scene. Eric's fiancée, heartbroken, fled while Limpus dismissed Eric's excuses, claiming that only a weak man would be unaffected by such a drug. Stung by this accusation, Eric challenged Limpus to a duel to prove his integrity. Limpus accepted, setting the meeting for the next day in the woods. Limpus had anticipated this, informing his sister of his confidence in the challenge, knowing Eric valued honor far too much, something Limpus did not. The azure-haired girl overheard this and rushed to warn Eric, who, despite his doubts, felt compelled to fight to reclaim his fiancée's trust. The following morning, Eric, along with the azure-haired girl, and Limpus met in the forest. The girl revealed that Limpus had orchestrated the scenario, but since Limpus was unwilling to back down, Eric had no choice but to accept the duel. Limpus intended to fight Eric himself, but instead summoned a muscle-bound thug to fight in his place. Not stopping there, the muscle-bound thug called upon reinforcements, leading to a chaotic brawl, with Eric facing 7 opponents. Undeterred, Eric charged forward, delivering swift blows that sent each foe crashing to the ground. However, Limpus then summoned a monstrous chicken to battle Eric. Eric, now weary and struggling, received encouragement from his fiancée, and the butler, reigniting his resolve, learned why he boldly challenged Eric, because Eric valued honor deeply while he did not. Bluehair overheard this and reported it to Eric. Suspicious, but determined, Eric accepted the challenge as a way to make amends to his fiancée. The next morning, Eric and Bluehair, along with the Limpus brothers, met in the forest. Bluehair claimed Limpus had orchestrated everything, but Limpus accepted the blame anyway. Eric had to settle the score by fighting. When Eric wanted to face Limpus himself, Limpus sent out a muscular henchman instead. But it didn't stop there. That henchman called in more allies one after another, until Eric found himself fighting 7 opponents. Still, he charged forward, knocking each one down with a relentless force. Then, Limpus unleashed a demon rooster to fight Eric. Eric's strength began to wane. He couldn't hold out much longer. Just then, his fiancée and the steward arrived, cheering him on, fueling his spirit to keep fighting. Suddenly, the demon rooster dashed toward his fiancée, awakening a fierce power within Eric. He surged forward, cutting down the demon rooster in one swift strike. Approaching Limpus, Eric asked if he'd surrendered. Limpus admitted defeat, but as Eric turned away, Limpus kicked him in the groin. Yet when someone loses everything, pain no longer bites as before. Eric defeated Limpus and rejoined his fiancée. The steward wondered how Eric didn't flinch after that strike. Eric explained he had trained to endure such pain. Bluehair had to admit Eric was a man of steel. The next day, Eric and Bluehair set off again on their mission. Eric now accepted his fiancée's medicine, with a smile promising to return soon. Eric and Bluehair travelled to a hot spring to cleanse their bodies before rejoining the Limpus group. The group tried to rent a boat to reach their next destination, but faced price gouging. Eric refused and left in frustration. Back with the crew, someone wondered why Eric was so upset when he had enough money to rent any boat. Eric insisted on not paying inflated prices. Everyone thought it better to take a longer route by land than pay extra for the sea passage. But Eric disagreed. He wanted to find the quickest way home even if it meant going by sea. The difference between the sea and land routes was only 3 days. Others advised Eric to join them going the long way, since the journey might hold unexpected adventures. They then split up to shop planning to meet back in an hour. Eric went off searching for the restroom as he urgently needed to go. Suddenly, Eric ran into one of his own subordinates, but the man was drunk and thought he was seeing things. After a moment, Eric heard a sound and followed it, discovering a pet reporting back to him. Someone just hung up the communicator and turned around only to find me standing right behind them, pretending to know nothing. But deep inside, I was certain I had seen it, the way it shook violently, then suddenly collapsed, unconscious, vomiting right in my face. After that, I went to wash up while my green hair caught the light. Eric's subordinates had seen me too, but they thought I was just some illusion. Then I distinctly heard Pete's voice blaming me for making it vomit like that. I made it spill the truth about what it really was, but it dismissed me as just a kid powerless to do anything. So I decided to give it a taste of its own medicine with some BDSM tricks that left it defeated. Then it gave me a riddle to solve. When I cracked it, the meaning was clear. Pet claimed to be my father. It even took pride in that, but of course I couldn't accept it because we were different species. That's when Pet spun a tale about my birth. It threw a grand party, but a dark witch, furious at being excluded, cursed Pete to take me under its wing, hence its current form. I didn't buy it. It sounded like a fairy tale. Pet went on saying that as I grew, it saw me as a maiden. Once when I dropped a ball into a lake, a talking frog appeared offering friendship and help. That night, the frog came again hoping for a kiss, but I knew how that story ended. So Pet pretended to be old and forgetful, but I wasn't convinced. I threatened to turn it into tomato sauce if it kept boasting. Out of options, Pet came clean. I was the chosen one, and it was a sign to follow me and offer advice when needed. Still, I wasn't buying any of it. Soon, another of Eric's subordinates was reading a romance novel and suddenly saw me sitting in a carriage, but he thought his eyes were tricking him. I kept talking about Pet speaking human language, but in front of everyone else, Pet acted normal, making everyone think I was losing my mind and needed to be taken to the capital for treatment. I knew I was being treated like a fool, and Pet kept teasing me to make me look even crazier. Knowing I couldn't argue, I decided to play along. I admitted I was wrong for trying to prove Pet could speak, promising never to bring it up again, but now I noticed Pete acting strange lately, so I suggested finding it a mate, a squirrel, or a cat even pressed its face against the window to choose. Thinking it was too much, I offered a hairless mouse as another option. Pet jumped onto the princess's head, calling me creepy. I thought Pet might be sick since it refused to find a partner during mating season, so I proposed neutering it to cure this illness. I grabbed my sword and told Peekit to endure it to take only one strike. Pet tried to run and screamed, and that's when the princess finally noticed Pet speaking human words. I stubbornly refused to believe it and insisted on neutering Pet. Eric happened to pass by, saw me about to do it, and froze, but he pretended not to notice. Meanwhile, the rebel council heard the news that the princess was protected by a mysterious, powerful warrior who wielded energy weapons unknown to them. Fearing Eric's reputation, they secretly sent someone to deal with him quietly. They broke a cannibal out of prison, sending him to hunt my group. I learned the princess planned to take me to the capital and find a way for me to fly to the Sky City. Perhaps there lies the secret of my fall from the heavens. Until then, I had to do my best as her bodyguard. The cannibal trailed us to an inn where we stayed. That day, I asked how much longer the journey would be. The answer, 2 months. I complained about the long wait, but the man urged me to focus on protecting the princess, who trusted me deeply. Suddenly, Maria burst in with news that the princess had reached her time. Confused, I was pulled to sea. Everyone saw the princess was perfectly normal, so I was ushered out quickly to avoid upsetting her. I wondered why she looked so ordinary, so I asked if I noticed the tuft of hair on her head. I did, but before they could explain, the princess complained of hunger, and we rushed to the kitchen to find food. Maria emptied the kitchen, but still found it insufficient. She told the chef we'd reserved the inn for the day, forbidding any new guests. Maria then asked me to help buy more food. As we left, the cannibal crept closer. I returned with food, explaining the princess was in a restless state. Though none had seen her during these times, stories warned it was terrifying. We had to avoid upsetting her. Once back, Maria prepared a mountain of food. We served it, but the princess devoured everything, instantly demanding more. Maria's hands went numb from the endless cooking. I kept bringing dishes, but they vanished like magic, and the second tuft of hair on the princess's head rose. I started to worry. The princess even meowed after every sentence, knowing it made me look silly, but I dared not risk angering her. She made Pet sing and try flying. Pet chirped and flapped helplessly. Maria worked herself to madness, but I believed the princess was simply growing and eating more than usual. We didn't need to pamper her excessively. I decided to handle things myself, visiting the princess's room. I told her I understood her situation, but reminded her not to trouble others. She needed to help Maria and Pet by carrying these plates down to the kitchen. Maria forced the cats to become birds, making them chirp and try to fly. She did this so much it drove her crazy. But he thought maybe the princess was just going through a phase and eating too much, so they didn't need to spoil her too much. He then decided to handle the situation himself. He went to the princess's room, saying he understood her current feelings, but warned her not to trouble others. She needed to help the other two first, and the first task was to carry all these dishes down to the kitchen. Maria and the others then. The shock was palpable. Despite everything, the princess still helped the poor girl. But once she retreated to her room, the others warned her not to be reckless like this again, unless she wanted to meet death. Calmly, she urged both of them to rest and not to worry. Darkness fell, and only then did the flesh-eating beast make its move, sneaking in. Slipping into the kitchen, it found Maria still busy cooking. With a sudden lunge to strike, Maria retaliated fiercely, flinging a ladle of soup into its face, knocking the skewer from its grasp. Flour dusted its head as Maria's anger ignited. She delivered a beating and demanded it leave immediately. Terrified for its life, the creature fled and shifted its focus. It approached the cook, but he stood firm, warning it to leave or face death. Mistaking the warning for a mere threat, the beast ran off, eventually reaching the princess's chambers. Knowing the princess was in bed, he crept forward to assassinate her. But with his third strand of hair standing on end, a nightmare was truly upon them. While the boy was in the restroom, the intruder grabbed him, pleading for help. Mistaking him for a hired thug sent to intimidate over the princess's affairs, the boy followed him to the princess's room to find her. But she was nowhere on the bed. Peeking out the window, he saw the intruder knocked out cold by the princess herself. She then toyed with the boy before lunging at him. Spotting the 3 strands of hair, he understood the danger and leapt out the window to escape. The assassination attempt failed, and the assassin vanished without a trace. Days later, the group arrived at a hot springs district, the largest on the continent. The boy seemed uneasy, unimpressed by this place filled mostly with kids and men, no girls in sight. Asking about services for men, they were directed across the way, then led to the hotel the Lord frequented when passing through. Staff escorted them to their rooms. The boy wondered whether Maria would bathe in the men's or women's bath. The Lord revealed Maria and the princess already had bathtubs in their rooms, while he and the boy would share a smaller room with an open-air bath. Eager, the boy dashed down to the springs, but the Lord urged him to relax and enjoy. Feeling nostalgic from a past family trip to hot springs, the boy sat back to listen to the Lord's stories. Suddenly hairs stood on his neck. Fear of being caught made him ask permission to sneak away quietly. Worried his orientation might be questioned, he felt an urgent need to fix things. But the Lord reminded him the springs also restored youth. Suddenly spotting Eric passing by the boy, hid in a corner, shocked the very person he despised most was here. Twice before, Eric had played dirty and cost him 2 precious gems. A sinking feeling told him he couldn't outplay Eric this time. Racing back to the princess's room, he asked to hide there, but the two were too caught up in their fun to notice. So he had to go after the Lord who had left the bath. The boy was certain the Lord had headed to the amusement area. Soon, he spotted Eric entering and immediately ducked out of sight. Watching, he saw Eric pleading with the gods for a blessing on his younger brother. Feeling a pang of sympathy, he let it go. Arriving at the princess's room, he begged to hide there. But inside, the two were so happily engrossed they didn't hear him. Forced to leave, he searched again, only to find the cook had left the bath. Certain the man had headed to the amusement park, he pressed on and soon spotted Eric entering. He hid immediately. Watching Eric, he saw him desperately praying to the gods for a miracle to keep his younger sibling safe. Feeling sympathy yet resigned, he moved on to the reception desk, begging them to ensure the princess and Maria stayed in their rooms at all costs. Next, he dashed to the adult amusement area, vast and overwhelming. But then, spotting girls dressed as bunnies and recalling the princess's love for animals, he found a cafe where guests sipped drinks while playing with cats. Certain she was inside, he asked around. Indeed, she was there. He told her everything, that he only wanted to avoid Eric, not fight him. Suddenly, Eric appeared nearby, forcing the princess to hide him quickly. Noticing the boy's calming presence, she realized her own powers were linked to Eric's proximity, causing her to glow mysteriously. Returning to the hotel, everyone noticed her radiant glow. When questioned, she could only shrug, unsure why she shone so brightly. This strange light would soon become a pivotal mystery, yet his radiant aura disturbed Len's rest. He urged him to ignore it, but then asked what would happen if he kept glowing like this forever. Fear crept in. He worried he'd never find a job, couldn't donate blood to help others, and worst of all, might never have a girlfriend. Overwhelmed, he stormed off to take a bath. As he sank into the bath, his glow faded. But then, unexpectedly, Eric showed up too. Their old rivalry sparked instantly. Eric was provoked by the light shining from his body, and the broom standing like a challenge between them. He wanted to fight, but he called a temporary truce, unwilling to destroy the place or fight while naked. He argued that a fight here would ruin the cafe's reputation, and being defeated naked would be humiliating. So he decided to get dressed before settling things. But just as he pulled on his clothes, he spotted Eric's momentary weakness and slammed the broom into his head with all his might. Then they escaped together. Later, they had to wrap him in bandages to hide his identity. He felt the wraps made him stand out more, looking like a mysterious assassin. When they reached a new town, while everyone else ate, he had to watch in silence, as they feared his glowing would reveal him if he spoke or ate openly. He voiced his needs but was ignored, so he peeled off the bandages to eat, only to be stopped and dragged away by the group. The townsfolk intercepted them, curious about his glowing body. They assumed he was badly burned, but when the bandages came off, his light was revealed. The villagers bowed, calling him a god. The village chief approached, saying an ancient prophecy spoke of a shining god descending among them. They believed he was that divine being. He admitted he was someone who fell from the heavens, and they welcomed him warmly. Finally, he ate his fill, realizing it was safer to go along with their belief than reveal the truth. He learned his glowing was caused by excess of magical energy radiating from within. The village chief gathered everyone, asking to witness his miracle. He made himself glow once more, and a swarm of butterflies appeared, circling him in awe. They truly saw him as their god, and asked him to restore the village's water source. He asked Len for a sword, then struck the village well with it. Suddenly, underground water burst forth, saving the villagers from hardship. The princess thought he was just lucky, but his true power was undeniable. As he radiated light, the village chief gathered all the villagers to witness this miraculous event. The villagers were captivated, believing him to be a deity, as butterflies flocked around him, illuminating the moment. They begged him to restore their village's water source. He asked for a sword, and with a powerful strike into the village well, the underground water surged forth, rescuing the villagers from their dire plight. The princess, however, warned him not to stray too far, fearing the consequences would be dire if he did. He planned to leave early, hoping to escape before things spiraled out of control. Yet the village chief inquired about the origins of their world. He began to ramble incoherently, prompting the princess and her group to explain on his behalf to the villagers, providing the answers they yearned to hear. In the end, they found themselves staying another day. The next morning, villagers gathered again, seeking divine knowledge about the world's beginnings and its future. He delivered a nonsensical explanation, which led to some standing up in protest, only to be silenced by his presence. How could mere mortals dare to challenge a deity? In the days that followed, the villagers constructed a grand temple for him, showering him with riches and surrounded by beautiful maidens. While he wished to indulge in this newfound life, the princess insisted he should leave before the truth came to light. He believed his glow would keep him hidden, that people would believe anything he said. However, the villagers began to grow restless, demanding to see him daily. He had to appear to calm them, before retreating to wrap himself in fabric to escape. But the village chief found him expressing the need for him to remain and teach the chaotic villagers, or else they might provoke conflicts with other sects to expand their beliefs. He insisted they cease such plans, and decided to step outside, urging the villagers to spread their faith by building a tower on the nearby mountain. This would buy him time and utilize their strength for a greater purpose. He designed the tower for the villagers, leveraging his skills as a top engineering student in the army. Days later, the tower was completed, and he stood radiating before the villagers. They urged him to shine brighter. He summoned more power, making a balloon he had secretly created soar into the sky, claiming it was a return to paradise, deceiving the villagers. Len decided to buy time and harness the villagers' strength by designing a tower for them. As the top engineer in the military, he crafted the structure over several days. When it was finished, the glowing boy stood before the villagers again, shining brightly. Len urged him to glow even more. He pushed his power to the limit, making the hot air balloon secretly built by Len take flight. The boy tricked the villagers, telling them he was returning to heaven. The chief reassured everyone that the boy would ascend, and their duty was to spread faith in him worldwide. At that moment, he and the group left town, but his glow suddenly vanished, causing panic. Without his light, the balloon began to fall, and everyone begged him to push himself to shine again. But he was out of energy, powerless to continue. Days later, they met Eric again, who was standing in the breeze. Suddenly, a blue-haired girl named Anma, who had been tracking their group from the Sky City, appeared. She rushed over to announce that Eric was about to rejoin the military. The blonde believed he would be by Eric's side as his strategist, but everyone else protested, each claiming to be Eric's closest confidant. That night, the boy wandered the inn while everyone else slept, deciding to report to Eric's 4 trusted aides. They were drinking together when the red-haired and black-haired aides started bickering, ready to fight. The blonde stopped them, warning not to cause trouble that would tarnish Eric's name. The 4 then decided to explain why each believed they deserved to serve Eric above all. The black-haired aide stepped forward, boasting that during Eric's rest he retreated to the mountains to train and endure harsh trials to surpass his limits. But everyone thought his training was just masochistic. More importantly, he invented a ridiculously named all-kill skill that no one could understand. Meanwhile, Eric and Anmar met a blacksmith commissioning a holy sword crafted specifically for Eric. Back at the tavern, the red-haired aide claimed he had forged unyielding willpower, describing a night out that turned into an almost mission, as he and 2 comrades entered an enemy den, actually just a bar. He said the enemy nearly caught on, putting them in a tight spot. Specifically, the women kept dodging the 3 men's advances. Eventually, his comrades passed out drunk and he ran out of money, so he spent the night with the bar owner to escape the situation. Hearing this, the blonde realized the red-haired aide's womanizing ways had caused him to be abandoned by his wife. Returning to Eric, Anma embedded a gem into the sword, infusing it with energy and warning Eric never to lose it again. Eric promised and vowed to redeem his past shame. Back to the blonde's story, he claimed he was the only one fit to serve Eric, because what Eric needed was love, not just a powerful attendant. Everyone noticed that when drunk, the blonde talked like a girl, a fact no one dared to challenge. That night, the boy watched quietly, feeling the complicated bonds of loyalty and desire swirling around Eric's circle. It was clear that beneath power and strategy, human emotions were the true battlefield. Knowing that Blondie here was really a girl disguised as a boy, everyone listened to her wild imagination about a morning beside Eric, which earned her a solid punch to sober her up. After all, Eric already had a fiancé. But Blondie ignored red hair, convinced that those types were just third wheels. Blondie blamed red hair for the chaos in this world, thinking red hair was just making excuses for being dumped by his wife. The argument between them flared up again. Blue hair wanted black hair to step in, but black hair had already fallen asleep. Blondie and red hair stood up ready to throw down, and now black hair woke up eager to join the fight to see who would become Eric's personal attendant. Blue hair agreed to the duel, but set the rules himself. All 4 would venture into the desert to hunt a dragon. It didn't matter who dealt the most damage. Only the one who landed the finishing blow would claim victory. Black hair charged forward, unleashing his ultimate all-kill technique. Red hair took advantage of the moment to circle behind and slice off the dragon's tail. Blondie rushed in to strike its head while blue hair lunged and shattered its horn. But the dragon fled, calling its elder brother a much mightier beast. The 4 were then knocked to the ground by a powerful kick. Just then, Eric arrived wielding a new sword. With a single devastating strike, he destroyed the dragon. Eric confessed to everyone that he was wrong to face the beast alone, and now wanted everyone's help to defeat it together. Back with the group, days dragged on as they faced a shortage of food, forced to catch fish just to survive. Now someone began to complain bitterly about his once comfortable life in the old world, lamenting how now he was reduced to living rough like a homeless wanderer. They told him to shake it off because tomorrow they'd reach the next town, but he missed home, missed everything he had left behind. That night, while everyone else slept, he lay awake, lost in memories of his homeland. The next morning, when the group arrived at the town, everyone noticed he was quieter than usual and seemed different somehow. From dawn until now, something had shifted in him. Later, it was revealed that he had made a wooden handle something to hold on to soothe his loneliness. At the inn, while others bathed and relaxed, he sat quietly fiddling with the piece of wood, muttering nonsense about wanting to eat snacks and read manga. He told the princess and Maria about these snacks, but they had no idea what bim bim was. From his awkward description, it sounded like some thinly sliced, strangely flavoured treat. Confused but curious, they went shopping to find and bring some back for him. At this point, he seemed a little unhinged, staring at the rectangular picture on the wall, which everyone understood was a tedious symbol of home. They decided to do something special for him. Maria asked what he wanted to eat, and he said a hamburger. Not knowing much, Maria had him write down the ingredients. Though the list looked strange, she promised to try making it. Even knowing it would cost a pretty penny, the princess decided to indulge him. After their market trip, the princess called him down to try the food. As he came downstairs, he found Maria had somehow managed to create Coca-Cola and a hamburger flavours so familiar they sparked pure joy in him. He happily asked for seconds. But when he peeked into the kitchen to see how Maria made it, he saw a place that looked like a witch's lab mixed with an alchemist's workshop, monsters flying all over the room. Fearful, he quickly stepped back, overwhelmed by the chaotic magic of her cooking domain. Retreating to his room, he escapes into the vivid realms of imagination, chasing Maria in his mind. Then a thought strikes him, not about the flavour, but something else his child mentioned. The manga exaggerates. Maria steps up with a mysterious item for him. He opens it, and suddenly blood spurts from his nose. It's an adult magazine. He covers his eyes with a blanket and dives back into his game, leaving everyone puzzled, unsure what he truly needs. Exhausted by the chaos, he decides to take his child out for a break. But instead of a simple outing, he leads him to a casino, not the flashy kind upstairs, but an underground arena, where stakes are real. There, he introduces him to a secret battlefield where bets are placed on fighters, warriors masked in mystery. One such masked gladiator is the reigning champion Hopeful. The father buys a ticket for his son, but forbids him from placing any bets himself. Waiting in the lounge, the child keeps asking why he can't bet. Minutes later, the fighters for the next round are summoned, and to everyone's shock, the child is among them. He's sent onto the arena alongside 3 hulking contenders for the championship. The moment the finalists appear, the tension is electric. In a dazzling display, the child outmaneuvers his opponents by circling them until they clash with each other, then striking the last standing fighter in the groin. The champion's manager recognizes that this kid is no joke and offers a handshake in shared respect. Next, the child faces a challenger wielding a chainsaw. Complaining, he's told that since he's carrying a sword, it's an even match. Fearing death, he bolts, chased by the deadly blade. The father wants him to fight like he did against Eric, but the child insists these are worlds apart. Cornered, he draws his sword and shatters the chainsaw, but then surprisingly retreats and escapes the arena, igniting the crowd's fury. Back outside, he believes those 3 were exploiting him for money, using his longing for home and his youthful innocence as bait. Days later, the group passes by an abandoned castle and decides to rest there overnight. The next morning, the child complains of back pain from sleeping in the ruins. Suddenly, a cannonball whizzes toward them, but the father reacts just in time to shield everyone. Eric's forces surge forward, and the father, along with the child, step up to block their advance. In the ensuing duel, a clash of swords triggers an explosion, sending the group tumbling down a cliffside. The father leaps after them, and soon the child regains consciousness. The princess and the father are safe, and they discover a fallen black-haired figure nearby. Meanwhile, Eric has captured Maria and taken her to his camp for interrogation. Maria plays the fool, openly admitting her foolishness and infatuation, causing Eric's side to underestimate her buying precious time. The black-haired man remains silent, refusing to reveal anything. The The princess tries to intimidate him, but the child stops her, knowing such tactics won't work on someone so stubborn. Maria's antics continue to frustrate the interrogators, making it impossible to extract information. The black-haired man vows to keep his secrets at all costs. When the child questions if anyone stronger than Eric exists, the man admits he only fears Eric. Of the others, one is weakened by womanly distractions, another by alcoholism, and the last by youth and inexperience. Though they learn the weaknesses of Eric's allies, they fail to uncover details about the canon. Still, the child devises a plan to counter Eric's forces, suspecting Maria's captivity is part of a larger scheme. Eric's patrol later returns reporting they found the black-haired man wounded in the forest, with a mysterious note stuck to his back. Reading the note reveals the child has arranged a secret meeting to settle everything once and for all. In a gesture of respect, Eric releases Maria. She notices something familiar in Eric, a reflection of herself. Eric suddenly shouts at her to hurry, his demeanor shifting. Maria returns to the abandoned castle and reunites with the group. The child instructs her to help prepare for the impending confrontation with Eric's faction. When Eric and his men arrive, the child has already drawn cunning arrows pointing the way. Eric follows the trail into a trap-filled chamber. The black-haired man eagerly sits in a torture chair, triggering a trap that crushes his leg. Ahead lies a magazine everyone knows it's a lure. Redhead steps forward, tempted but determined, grabbing it before retreating. Thinking she's safe, Redhead is suddenly struck by a falling iron pot. The next room is stacked with barrels of liquor, but she stays sharp, smashing them to avoid harm. Eric's men keep falling into traps inside the castle one by one. Eric and his 4 henchmen press on, unaware of the clever snares awaiting them. The castle becomes their labyrinth of folly, dismantling their confidence piece by piece as the child and friends watch from the shadows. With a swift motion, Eric unleashed his sword from a distance, annihilating both the princess and the enemy. Everyone believed the two were dead and began to retreat. However, the princess awoke amidst the ruins, truly convinced that both she and the enemy were gone. In the days that followed, Eric's men meticulously monitored Maria and Leon to catch any unusual behavior. The red-haired and golden-haired boys spotted both of them at an inn, raising suspicion due to the enemy's cunning nature. Maria, appearing to accept defeat, was too docile, which struck Eric as suspicious. Meanwhile, the golden-haired boy kept close to the red-haired one, ensuring he wouldn't abandon their mission for some frivolous adventure. That night, they observed Maria and Leon, finding no alarming actions. The following morning, Maria and Leon remained in their room while the golden-haired and red-haired boys bickered over the mission. The red-haired boy wanted to blend leisure with duty, but the golden-haired boy wouldn't allow it. They noticed Maria and Leon leaving, so they followed, splitting to track their targets. The red-haired boy shadowed Leon, who seemed blissfully unaware. Leon entered a cafe and met with a man exchanging money. The red-haired boy decided to tail this mysterious figure climbing a mountain. However, thick fog soon obscured his view, and he lost the man. When he returned, the golden-haired boy announced that both had returned to the inn. Upon hearing that the red-haired boy had lost his target, the golden-haired boy mocked him for his failure. At that moment, the black-haired and blue-haired boys felt disheartened, having lost their enemy and motivation to fight. They assumed Eric would feel the same, but when Eric entered his tent, laughter erupted from him. It was now day 3 of monitoring Maria and Leon, who spent their time idly within the inn, causing the red-haired and golden-haired boys to feel utterly bored. That night, the red-haired boy suggested they investigate the man he had lost track of earlier. Initially appearing as a serious mission, he soon found himself in a tavern reveling with a girl until dawn without returning. On the 4th day, the golden-haired boy punched the red-haired boy, confining him to the room until their surveillance was complete. That day passed without incident. Later that evening, the red-haired boy spotted Maria leaving and immediately followed her, believing she had a lead on the princess and the enemy. However, Maria was merely seeking solace in a drink. The red-haired boy sat behind her ordering drinks as well, and they both drank continuously, until the red-haired boy succumbed to drunkenness first. Yet Maria showed no signs of inebriation. Unable to hold back any longer, the red-haired boy approached Maria directly, stating he had no intention of fighting, so she need not draw her weapon. Maria confessed her defeat, revealing her inability to fulfill her crucial mission. Now, drinking was her only escape. Despite being followed, they both knew their efforts were futile, and Maria departed, striking the red-haired boy as retribution for their actions against the princess. The next morning, the red-haired boy insisted the golden-haired boy pack up and return, feeling Maria's words bore truth. Suddenly, he recalled that Maria had been aware of their surveillance all along. They hurried to find her and Leon, only to remember the graveyard from earlier. Upon arrival, they witnessed Leon and Maria conducting a funeral for 2 coffins, leading them to believe the enemy and princess were truly dead. With this assumption, they decided to conclude their mission and head home. After that day, Maria and Leon disappeared, but surprisingly, the enemy and princess were still alive. They then encountered a girl exuberant and overly energetic, who complained to her parents about her hair looking bad, fearing others would see her as unattractive. Despite her parents' concerns, she resolved to visit her grandmother. As she stepped outside, the villagers shunned her, but she remained oblivious. Meanwhile, the enemy sat smugly satisfied with their fake death ruse. They had previously used a large mirror in the castle to reflect and deceive Eric's group. The acting skills of Leon and Maria, along with the staged funeral, had successfully thrown off their pursuers, allowing them to feel confident they would not be disturbed. Suddenly, a sharp pain seized the enemy's stomach, leaving him puzzled by the discomfort, as he hadn't eaten anything unusual and had no need to relieve himself. Meanwhile, Miranda had arrived at her grandmother's house and accidentally choked on a cake while cleaning, causing her to faint after being struck by her own broom. As she stumbled outside, she inadvertently bumped into the enemy's group, and a spark of love ignited between Miranda and the enemy. She envisioned them as destined partners. When she heard he was suffering from stomach pains, she believed it to be a serious illness, lamenting their love's tragic timing just as he was about to leave this world. Rumors spread that the princess and the child have been killed. The next morning, Red-Haired tells Blonde-Haired to pack up and head home, believing Maria's warning was true. Suddenly, Red-Haired recalls Maria knew they were being watched from the start, prompting them to investigate. They rush to the cemetery where they find the princess and the child performing a solemn funeral ritual for 2 empty coffins. Convinced the princess and child are truly dead, Blonde and Red-Haired decide to end their mission and return. Meanwhile, Maria and the child quietly slip away, alive and well. Soon, they encounter a lively girl brimming with energy and optimism. She complains to her parents about her messy hair, fearing others will see her as ugly. They reassure her, but she decides to visit her grandmother. Though her parents doubt the wisdom of the visit, she insists. As Miranda steps onto the street, villagers shun her, unaware she doesn't realize their coldness. Back with the child, he smirks over their perfect fake death plan, using a giant mirror in the castle to fool Eric's group. The acting skills of the child, Maria, and their staged funeral sealed the deal, allowing them to shake off Eric's pursuit confidently. But then, a sudden stomach pain grips the child, confusing and alarming him since he hasn't eaten anything unusual or felt the urge to use the restroom. Meanwhile, Miranda arrives at her grandmother's house and accidentally causes her to choke on a pastry. Seizing the moment, she quickly cleans the house to keep germs away. When Grandma reaches for a glass of water, a broom knocks it away and she collapses unconscious. Miranda rushes outside and bumps into the child's group. In that instant, lightning strikes. A spark of love hits Miranda's heart, leaving her dazed and dreamy-eyed, beginning a new chapter of unexpected feelings. Miranda believed that the two were destined for each other. When she heard about the pain he was suffering, she imagined it as a fatal illness, turning their love story into a tragic tale of imminent separation. Unable to accept this, she clung to him tightly. At that moment, he was being guided to meet the doctor. Miranda followed closely and began weaving a fantasy that they had shared a beautiful romance all along, and now was the cruel moment to part. She trusted that a sharp wake-up call would snap him back to reality. So she rushed forward and punched him repeatedly in the face before running off, believing he would no longer sink into despair. Later, he returned to the group lamenting about being beaten. Everyone assumed he must have provoked someone to deserve such treatment, yet he hadn't done anything wrong. Realizing this, Maria accompanied him to the doctor, and Miranda immediately pinpointed Maria as her rival. Miranda saw him as a cunning trickster who had toyed with her emotions. Enraged, she charged at him wielding a massive greatsword. He narrowly dodged, but she stumbled and fell. He reached out to help, but then Miranda spotted Maria's wardrobe mishap, called him a despicable scoundrel, and fled. Afterwards, he saw the doctor and learned it was just a mild poisoning. On his way back, Maria confronted him about the earlier incident, but he honestly had no idea what was going on. Meanwhile, Miranda reflected on her impulsive attack and convinced herself that his flirtations were her cue to walk away. Once again, she approached me in a flurry, demanding I express my feelings. But I was utterly lost, unsure of what she needed from me. She turned her back, waiting for me to confess, but I fled instead. In a bid to stop my escape, she threw a knife at my shoe, declaring a duel between us. We found ourselves on the grassy field, surrounded by our friends. Miranda launched the first attack, striking fiercely, while declaring that we had once known each other intimately, sharing a beautiful love that she was ready to rekindle. Her words ignited doubts in my heart, even as I tried to assert that I had no memory of her. Despite my protests, Miranda's strength overwhelmed me, forcing me to bow my head in defeat. She determined that someone as weak as me was unworthy of her love, and with that, she turned away, leaving me to grapple with my inadequacies. I returned to my group, who were planning to rent a boat for our next destination, but after being overcharged, I refused to pay and stormed off in frustration. Back with my friends, I wondered why they seemed so relaxed despite having enough money to rent the entire vessel. They insisted they wouldn't pay unless it was a fair price, so they suggested taking a longer route instead of the quick sea path. I resisted, eager to find the fastest way home. However, the difference between the two paths was merely 3 days, and everyone encouraged me to enjoy the journey's adventures. We split up to gather supplies and agreed to meet back in an hour. I went my separate way in search of a restroom when suddenly I came across one of Eric's henchmen, who in his drunken state mistook me for someone else. Following a faint sound, I stumbled upon Pet, who was reporting back to someone. As it caught sight of me, it feigned ignorance, but I knew it recognized me. In a moment of panic, I shook it hard, causing it to faint and vomit all over me. As I went to wash my face, I caught the eye of another one of Eric's minions, but they dismissed me as just a mirage. Yet, I distinctly heard Pet blaming me for its unfortunate incident. I pressed it to reveal the truth about its identity, but it merely scoffed, calling me just a kid, incapable of anything. Determined to teach it a lesson, I decided to introduce it to some BDSM games to put it in its place. After some struggle, it finally relented and presented me with a riddle to solve. Once I figured it out, the answer suggested that Pet was my father. It claimed that it had raised me, but I could never accept that, knowing we were from entirely different worlds. So it spun a tale about how when I was born, it threw a grand party to celebrate my arrival. But a dark wizard was furious for not being invited to the feast, so he cast a curse on the Pet, claiming it had shielded the boy, thus transforming into this form. Yet the boy couldn't believe it. It sounded like a fairy tale. The Pet continued saying that as he grew up, he'd appear like a young lady, and during one game when the boy accidentally dropped a ball into a pond, a talking frog approached him, offering to help and wanting to be friends. That night, the frog returned, hoping for a kiss, but the boy knew how the story ended and pretended to be a fake pet. Still, he wasn't convinced, threatening to turn it into sour soup if it continued to boast. With no other options, the Pet finally declared that he was the chosen one, and had the duty to accompany the boy, offering advice when needed. The boy remained skeptical of its words. Shortly after, another member under Eric's command was reading a romance novel, when he suddenly spotted a strange sight, a pet sitting in a carriage. He thought he was seeing things, but the pet kept insisting it could speak, while everyone around dismissed it as mere delusion, suggesting the boy needed to be taken to the capital for treatment. The boy knew he was being regarded as a fool, and the pet relentlessly teased him, making him appear even more foolish in front of everyone. Aware he couldn't argue back, he decided to turn the tables on the pet, admitting he was wrong for trying to prove it could speak. He vowed not to mention it again, but now he expressed that he had noticed something odd about the pet lately, and proposed helping it find a mate. He pressed the pet's face against the carriage window, letting it choose between a sheep or a cat. But feeling overly dramatic, he pulled out a hairless rat as an alternative choice. The pet scampered up to the princess, thinking the boy was being creepy. The boy insisted that the pet might be ill since it was breeding season, and suggested neutering it to alleviate its condition. He brandished a sword, telling the pet to brace itself, as one swift strike would be enough. The pet attempted to flee screaming. At that moment, the princess realized the pet had been speaking human language all along. The boy, still in disbelief, was determined to go through with the neutering. Eric, passing by, caught sight of the boy insisting on neutering the pet, startled it, thinking it was still alive. However, Eric decided to play deaf and pretended he heard nothing. Soon, the group arrived at a moving castle, which utilized magic to glide straight to the capital. Meanwhile, the current ruler met with a minister of foreign affairs, the very man who would marry the princess. The minister heard rumors of the princess's assassination, but believed his niece was still alive due to her great fortune. He then turned to leave, and we could see he had a rather erratic memory, sometimes remembering, other times forgetting. Upon hearing the princess might be alive, the minister decided to investigate and punish the rebels if the princess's survival proved true. The boys' group reached the royal city, but they would have to climb a tower to meet the king. Fortunately, the process was quick, thanks to a lift that transported royals up there. As they stepped into the hall, they encountered a group of elders, all relatives of the princess, eyeing the throne hungrily. Upon reuniting with the king, the princess stepped forward to greet him. Indeed, he was a man who often forgot after taking a breath. Without his advisors by his side, he would likely remember nothing at all. The princess received a mask or crown to wear for the wedding. As for the boy, he was to visit the astrologer in the west, to find a way back to the city in the sky. He overheard the king mention his destiny, but left abruptly due to his own embarrassing predicament. Afterward, he returned to the princess's group, who were on their way to visit her fiancé. Thus, he had to find his own way to the Western Tower. Unfortunately, there were dozens of towers in the west, so he reluctantly asked for a map to navigate. He informed them that if he found the way, he would return without saying goodbye. They were prepared for his departure, knowing they could no longer cling to him. He set off on his own and soon got lost. Fortunately, he stumbled upon the pet again, who informed him that this area was dark and used by criminals. The pet had also come down to secure some orders. Acknowledging that he had treated the pet poorly in the past, the boy asked for its help to find a way out. The pet obliged, guiding him through shadowy corners. While traversing a narrow tunnel, he discovered a rebel organization, and the pet donned a mask for both of them to avoid recognition. However, they were soon spotted by the leader of the rebels, who began to explain his objectives. The boy realized that knowing the truth was merely a pretext for being eliminated. He fled, only to encounter another group of rebels who were animal rights activists. They also recognized him and shared their ideals, using it as a reason to eliminate him. He ran again, only to face another rebel faction, this time made up of transgender individuals who also recounted their ideals before chasing him away. Outside, the leaders of all three factions had gathered and decided to battle for the autonomy of the kingdom. Taking advantage of the chaos, the boy slipped away, and soon more leaders of rebel organizations were joining the fray. Eventually, he and the pet reached the astrologer's tower. Upon arrival, he met the astrologer, but the man could not tell him how to ascend to the city in the sky. Suddenly, a voice urged him to visit the princess's fiancé, where he would find a way to reach the city above. Displeased with the roundabout nature of this quest, the boy rushed forward only to see the figure vanish. Indeed, the city in the sky awaited. The next morning, he returned to find the princess, who thought he had come to bid farewell. He clarified that he wished to continue accompanying the group. At that moment, Maria returned, and another individual was sent to support the group on their upcoming journey. The three new characters gathered appeared familiar. Here stood the nobles closely tied to the princess, their eyes sharp with ambition, as if plotting to seize the throne. When the king appeared, the princess stepped forward, but he was a man lost in time, forgetting moments as soon as they passed. Without his trusted aide's reminders, he would have forgotten everything about her. The princess then received a mask or crown to wear at the wedding ceremony. Regarding our hero's quest, he had to visit the Western astrologer to find a way back to the floating city. The king mentioned he had some mysterious destiny, but before revealing more, he abruptly left overwhelmed. Our hero returned to the princess's group. Now she must visit her fiancé's home, so he needed to find his own path to the Western Tower. Unfortunately, the West was dotted with dozens of towers, so he had to borrow a map and set off alone. He made it clear that if he found a way back, he wouldn't even bother to say goodbye, but they were ready to let go. Venturing on his own, he soon got lost. Luckily, he ran into his pet, who explained that this was a dark zone, a den for the underworld's dealings. The pet was here to close deals too. He admitted he hadn't always treated the pet well, and begged for help to find the way out. Following the pet's guidance, they snuck through narrow tunnels. Suddenly, he uncovered a rebel organization. The pet handed them both masks to avoid detection, but their cover was blown by the gang's leader. The leader shared his goals and saw our hero's knowledge as a threat, using it as a pretext to eliminate him. He narrowly escaped, only to stumble upon another rebel faction, this one led by animal lovers. The leader recognized him immediately and repeated the same threat, claiming his ideals justified silencing him. Again, he ran for his life. Then he encountered yet another rebel group, this time a transgender faction. He heard their ideals, but they too chased him out. He barely escaped, racing toward whatever hope waited beyond the chaos. Outside, the leaders of the three factions had gathered, deciding to clash in a fierce battle to claim autonomy over the kingdom. Our hero Con seized the moment to escape, while more rebellious faction leaders rose to fight amongst themselves. Con, accompanied by his pet, finally reached the astrologer's tower, just as he arrived. There Con met the astrologer, but the old man had no clue how to reach the floating city above. Suddenly, a mysterious voice echoed, telling him to visit the princess's fiancé's house, only there would he find a way to the Sky City. Con, impatient with such detours, rushed forward, but the figure vanished, and above the real floating city shimmered in the distance. The next morning, Con returned to find the princess, who thought he had come to say goodbye, but Con revealed his wish to continue the journey alongside the group. Maria also returned, and another ally was sent to support their expedition. The three gathered their faces familiar, hinting at deeper connections. Meanwhile, the rebellious factions, learning the princess still lived, prepared to strike the kingdom from all sides. They had finally armed themselves for the plan. Eric, knowing Con survived, called it for reinforcements to the capital to settle past scores. Con sat quietly, reflecting in a corner, aware that once they reached their destination, their journey would end, and so would their reasons to stay together. Yet he worried for the princess, sensing her disdain for this arranged marriage. But Con chose to focus on their mission, escorting her safely. Curious, he asked about the princess's whereabouts. Upstairs, she was learning wedding etiquette from Maria. Meanwhile, a figure with blue hair stealthily infiltrated the palace. Eric had been suspended and banned from marching here, but Blue Hair refused to sit idly by. He wanted to deal with the princess himself before superiors could act. The princess, hearing Maria praise the minister repeatedly, grew increasingly irritated. Everyone seemed to act the same. Blue Hair found Con's room and caught him doing antics that looked utterly ridiculous, jumping on a mattress in nothing but shorts. This absurd spectacle was just the beginning of their tense encounter. The wedding preparations were underway for Maria, while the green-haired one stealthily infiltrated the palace. Despite Eric being grounded and forbidden from approaching, the green-haired one was determined not to sit idly by. He wanted to handle the princess himself before anyone else could act. At that moment, Maria's constant praises for the minister were grating on her nerves. It seemed everyone was acting the same way, much like the green-haired one who had found the princess's room and was now engaging in absurd antics, jumping on the bed in nothing but his shorts and exposing his rear to the window. He burst in to stop these ridiculous actions, still wearing a mask to hide his identity. When he inquired about the princess's fiancé, he learned that the green-haired one had never met him, but he was eager to intervene in this marriage. He then recognized the young man before him, but the green-haired one shot a dart and knocked him out cold. Afterward, the green-haired one slipped away while the minister, upon hearing news of an intruder, realized it was someone from Eric's side, likely there to assassinate the princess. He chose to ignore the green-haired one, and passed by noticing another young man playing with a cat, who then asked about how the minister treated his servants, concerned for the princess's impending marriage. However, as soon as he laid eyes on the green-haired one, he felt a sense of déjà vu leading to a fate similar to the one before him. The green-haired one then encountered Maria, calling her to a halt for a conversation. Maria began rambling about things that were lost on him, and when she recognized his mask, she immediately fell prey to his charm. Even Bet couldn't escape his fate when she entered the princess's chamber, realizing the green-haired one was there, revealing that her bodyguards had been dealt with. The green-haired one regarded the princess with such reverence that he seemed ready to sacrifice himself to save the world, but she felt uneasy and threatened him instead. At that moment, he regained consciousness, having narrowly survived thanks to the magazines hidden in his coat. He dashed past the young man, who was still alive thanks to a coin in his pocket. They both rushed outside, running into Maria, who had only been grazed by the dart, while Bet bore a few minor wounds. The four of them then made their way to find the princess, only to discover her lying unconscious on the bed. It turned out the princess was simply asleep. They were baffled at how she could have escaped unharmed, and she thought the green-haired one must have read a few stories to make her go home. The green-haired one understood that the princess acted as she did because she believed her personal happiness was a trivial price compared to the happiness of the people. Even if she were to be assassinated, there would be others to take her place, so she felt no fear. Thus, the green-haired one gave up on the situation, as he preferred to be the perpetrator rather than the victim of happiness. The princess believed these actions were sacrifices for her own happiness, a happiness that compared to that of the entire nation was a tiny price to pay. Even if she were assassinated now, others would replace her, so she felt no fear. Blue Hair, who thrived on torment rather than happy victims, gave up. Con, still puzzled, sought the princess's explanation. She only gazed out the window, reminding Blue Hair that her life was a debt owed to him, and he would come to collect eventually. That very day, they reached the minister's castle, marking the near end of Con's journey. But, with the wedding still a month away, the princess would keep issuing commands until then. Inside the minister's castle, they met his head steward, who arranged rooms for them. Con asked after the minister needing to discuss urgent matters, but was told the two families wouldn't meet until all wedding rites were complete. Curious about the path to the Sky City, Con learned there was a secret research facility nearby, but the steward was forbidden to reveal its location. However, without waiting for permission, Con's pet procured the information leading them to the research institute. Entry required a permit, but Con refused to wait. This information was classified, and the butler couldn't disclose it. However, I had already gathered intel myself and discovered the location of this place. I then led my companion Pet to the research institute, but upon arrival, I realized I needed a permit to enter. Rather than going through the front, I decided to sneak in. Inside, I encountered a receptionist who asked what I needed. I explained that as a warrior, I wanted to ascend to the sky. Immediately, she activated a security alert leading to my capture. I found myself thrown into a room where I met someone who could provide answers, as long as I could prove I was a magical warrior. I drew my sword and began to transform it, causing the wall before me to open. Before me stood a child, yet he was the master of this place. I couldn't believe the leader was a mere boy, so I demanded to see the real authority. After listening to this child's theories, I began to suspect he truly was in charge. To gain information, however, I had to agree to be a test subject for this boy. He proceeded to place several devices on me and called in two girls to observe. The boy wanted to see if a warrior like me would react like an ordinary person, and indeed, I did. I then found myself taken to the testing pool. They submerged me in water, tying my hands to a rock, pushing me to drown. Realizing I could indeed drown like any human, I flipped the script and demanded information in return from the boy. He asked me two questions, one of which was how to reach the sky. He confirmed the answer, but when I inquired about the spaceship outside, he stated it wasn't powerful enough to reach the floating city. Frustrated that I hadn't received any useful information, I grew impatient. I wondered how long it would take to discover answers for the princess. With time still on my side, I continued my role as a test subject. After enduring a series of grueling experiments, I was asked 4 more questions. When I inquired about the floating city, I learned that it operated via magic, indicating it was human-made, not divine. However, accounts of the city varied, leaving much in doubt. I asked a few more random questions, but the boy's experiments left me with nothing of value. I continued undergoing tests to gauge my informational and imaginative capacity. All results pointed to me being just an ordinary person, lacking any extraordinary traits. Yet, I had the chance to ask 2 more questions, yearning to uncover secrets about the floating city. I learned that there had once been a path from the ground to the floating city, but it was now concealed, and no one knew its location. When I asked if he knew anything further, he admitted he didn't. Thus, I chose to leave since I had exhausted my questions. But the boy rushed over using his adorable little brother eyes to plead with me to stay. I hesitated only to find myself bound by his request. Soon, I was placed on an operating table, as the boy believed a magical warrior like me might have something different from an ordinary human. Since they lacked advanced technology, I realized surgery was imminent. Just then, Pet cut the power and came to my rescue. Together, we found ourselves surrounded by guards, but I broke through the wall to escape. The boy researcher called me back, but I was determined never to return. Meanwhile, the blue-haired companion returned to find the other three punishing themselves for Eric's suspension. One hung himself, another refused to indulge in distractions, while the last opted for spicy food over alcohol. Bored and restless, Eric decided it was time for independent action and asked the blue-haired friend to tell the others to stop. At this point, I had to accompany the princess to a lesson on the 18 marriage ceremonies. The final one mentioned the floating city, prompting me to ask the instructor about it. He refused to answer, insisting I had to learn before I could know. Confused about why I was involved, I discovered that the servants could assist the princess in completing the ceremony faster. The first task was to chop down a tree in one strike, after which Maria would carve it. My job was to haul the wood down the mountain. I attempted to glide on the log across a stream, only to fall straight down a waterfall, feeling utterly helpless. As I crawled onto the shore, I questioned why an unrelated party should participate in this ceremony. The butler explained that ceremonies were ancient actions passed down through generations, and when I asked why I had to take part, the answer was simply that it was a ceremony. I then had to arrange a domino line and learn about previous ceremonies. After the first ceremony, I was tasked with carving the log into 2 swans. I couldn't argue against this tradition, so I gritted my teeth and complied, feeling powerless. I was then forced to dance next to a fire, and by morning, I was dizzy and collapsed. When I came to, I had to gather the pieces to continue my tasks. I then had to use those pieces to create a drawing exactly like the one on this paper. After a while of focusing on the ground to draw, I began to hallucinate about the universe, only to have my creation destroyed in a moment of regret. Now it was time for the domino setup, and I had arranged countless pieces, spiraling into despair and letting out a loud scream to vent my frustration. I encountered Maria again, who informed me that I needed to set up 45 million dominoes to satisfy the requirement. Feeling overwhelmed, I refused to follow this absurd tradition any longer. Maria then rambled about how jealous she was of the princess for experiencing the wedding ceremony, something she would likely never feel herself. Meanwhile, Eric's group had begun to observe me, uncertain whether I realized they were watching. I might not have known, or perhaps I did, but I was playing along as if I didn't, hoping to lure Eric into action. They had been present at my recent ceremonies, trying to disrupt my process. Using chalk, Con painstakingly drew a cosmic diagram matching the one on paper. Hours passed with his head bowed, spiraling into wild fantasies about the universe until his masterpiece was destroyed in a moment of regret. Later, he stacked countless dominoes only to break down in despair and scream into the void. Maria appeared, informing him that he must line up 45 million domino tiles to fulfill the ritual. Con, feeling overwhelmed, declared he'd had enough of these customs. Maria, however, lamented her envy of the princess, who would experience a wedding Maria might never feel in her lifetime. From afar, Eric's group observed Con, unsure if he knew they were watching. Perhaps Con sensed it, but played along, baiting Eric into making the first move. Recently, the rebels had sabotaged several ceremonies, always appearing to disrupt him. At the first rite, riding a log, red hair planned to distract Con with a seductive woman, hoping he'd fall, but lacking a female, the rebels revealed themselves, trying to break his focus. But Con was too fast oblivious to their tricks. Elsewhere, some scoundrels dressed as swan maidens to catch Con's eye and confuse him, but their plan failed too. Around the campfire, the 5 rebels chatted, forgetting their mission, while Con sketched quietly. Eric, annoyed by Con's mistake, stepped out to correct him. Con recognized Eric, but let him help anyway, knowing they'd cross paths again. When Eric returned, everyone accused him of ulterior motives. At the domino stacking round, Eric planned to sabotage by buying all dominoes from the market, but prices had skyrocketed as the minister's faction stocked up. Con's group had only a few coins left, having split from their sponsors, and Eric himself was broke. Suddenly, they found an old man selling dominoes. With little money, Maria boldly bought all his tiles. Soon, a fierce tug of war erupted over the merchant, with Con jumping in to protect him. In the struggle, a splash of red spilled just the man's wine. Maria stumbled and fell into Eric, rolling together and accidentally touching a sensitive spot. This mishap would set off a chain of future events. The red was just the old man's wine, thankfully. Soon after the 14th ritual, jumping from height was completed. With their group severed from support, their higher-ups stopped funding the aid. They hoped Eric might sponsor them, but he was broke. Suddenly, they encountered an old man selling dominoes. With little money, Maria boldly bought all his stock. A fierce tug-of-war ensued over the poor vendor. Stepping in to protect him, the boy got involved too, pulling fiercely until a spray of red burst forth. Maria stumbled and fell onto Eric. They tumbled accidentally, striking each other's pressure points. This accident would trigger many future events. The red splash, just the old man's spilled wine. Soon after the 14th ritual, the princess's first eyelash falling from above was complete. But as they took a brief breather, the princess's first hair strand suddenly stood on end. Alarmed, the boy covered her mouth to stop her from speaking nonsense. They then all headed to a karaoke night. He never imagined this world was so modern. But he was wrong. What appeared to be a TV turned out to be a dwarf playing an instrument. The princess grew uneasy, her second hair strand about to rise. Maria hurriedly ordered food, asking the princess what she liked. Maria's voice darkened, demanding the dishes arrive quickly. After the first round of food, the princess still craved more. Maria rushed to order again, and soon dishes arrived. The boy wanted the princess to sing, but Maria took control, forbidding her to sing in this state. Previously, during a similar episode, the princess had forced dozens to listen to her sing for hours non-stop. Despite continuous singing, the princess showed no sign of stopping. After that ordeal, 17 fainted and 64 were hospitalized. The theatre collapsed and took 2 months to rebuild. Later, when the scene cuts here, presumably more events unfold, the princess soon stopped the music, declaring it wasn't good enough. So, Maria switched to another song, one about her own sexual identity. That's when I understood they would have to sing about their own shame, accepting the pressure weighing down on them. I then accepted sitting beside Eric, listening quietly. Hearing the noise, someone wanted to knock on the door to restore order, but everyone stopped them, saying they came here to enjoy themselves, not cause trouble. Back with me, Maria finished singing while the guy claimed he couldn't read the lyrics to avoid singing, so he had to get up and sing anyway, downing a bottle of wine to drown his stress, and sang about cats. But I couldn't let myself stay in my comfort zone because Maria signaled him to grab the shaker. He added percussion, and suddenly, after finishing, the princess discovered the karaoke scoring system. She ordered the pets to outscore him or face being thrown out. Just as the last note faded, Maria had to call the receptionist to bring another dish. Pressure soared, and I wanted to help the pet, but if any noise leaked in, the score would drop. All we could do was silently hope the pet would survive the ordeal. When singing, everyone noticed the pet actually sang well, but it often made mistakes by getting too into character and reading slang words not in the lyrics. That was counted as errors. In the end, when the pet thought it had sung beautifully, we all had to share condolences. Then, the princess demanded the score be calculated, and the pet needed at least 80 points to survive. When the pet believed it had performed great, we could only offer sympathy. The princess set a cruel rule score below 80, and the pet's fate was sealed. She barely managed to scrape 70, and to hit 80, he had to toss a piece of meat into the scoring slot, and trick the princess into believing the light had turned green at 80. But the princess wasn't looking closely, so he rushed over to block the meat from falling. In a moment of chaos, Maria shot the TV to save Pet. Meanwhile, everyone else was drunk and starting to lose their minds. Eric, overwhelmed, had to step outside for some air and yelled about wanting to sing. He passed by hearing but ignoring the chaos returning to the group. Eric decided it was his turn to sing, but everyone kept snatching the remote, their madness escalating. When he returned to the room, he realized hell awaited him inside and decided to leave. If anyone asked, he would just say he got lost. But just as he thought he was escaping hell, pulled him back, forcing him to endure the torturous singing of the princess with no way out. Eric finally got a chance to sing when everyone else fell asleep, but the receptionist announced they were closing soon. Shortly after, the final ritual began a rhino chariot race, just as the name suggested. The princess and the minister officially met while Maria couldn't stop crying. Eric felt disheartened as the ritual he had hoped would be meaningful turned out to be nothing. Eric realized they had failed to prevent the wedding. Unbeknownst to them, the organizers were deliberately stalling to ensure the ceremony went off without a hitch. Green Hair volunteered to investigate, with Red Hair following worried Red would stray off, but Eric ignored the concerns and let Red go. He then decided to venture down to find him, prompting Yellow Hair to chase after him. That evening, the princess visited their group to say goodbye, thanking everyone for their support. Maria asked if she needed help, but the princess declined and left. The princess headed to the minister's office, where he showed her his collection of stuffed animals. At that moment, he was anxiously shaking his legs, worrying it was too late. The minister wanted her to wear the cute outfits he'd prepared. He seemed quite childish, communicating with the princess through puppets, instead of his real voice. He couldn't stop fretting about the minister potentially being a horrible person, yet it was the princess's choice and he had no right to interfere. He began accepting the reality, yet thoughts of the minister lingered in his mind, making him repeatedly bang his head against the wall to suppress dark thoughts. Suddenly the princess became furious, her hair standing on end, causing the entire room to explode. He rushed to see the minister sprawled out, begging for mercy. The minister's guards arrived, thinking he had attempted to assassinate a high-ranking official. Everyone had to carry both the princess and clear the path for him to escape. Eric sat despondently by the lake when suddenly his group showed up, asking him to handle the situation. An arrow storm rained down, but Eric managed to hide behind a tree. He then encountered Yellow Hair and Black Hair, who overheard Eric's secretive confessions, making him embarrassed, prompting him to run off and fight to forget. But when they called him an accomplice to the minister's assassination, Eric realized he was getting set up by his own group. They had escaped, and he asked why the princess had attacked the minister. He offered a slew of reasons, but the final straw was that a nose hair from the minister was dangling, irritating her. Eric was now running for his life, vowing to take revenge on the minister. The minister too swore retaliation against the princess at all costs. Meanwhile, the rebels rejoiced at the rift between the princess and the minister, knowing war was on the horizon. Green Hair was discovered by elite rebel soldiers, while Eric was trying to escape and had to climb a tree with a sniffer dog hot on his trail. Suddenly, a bright light transported all of Eric's group away. He heard the news and told everyone to prepare themselves instead of panicking. They were soon teleported back, and he heard the voice of Amma, who requested his help once again. As he recalled past events, he awakened to find Amma, who had asked him to save this world. He hesitated, knowing it was dangerous and could lead to death, but in return he would receive a boon from her. When he asked her name, she said it was a secret. However, she didn't force him to join. He could return to his old world if he wished, but that would come with a lot of hardships, causing him to waver on whether to help or not. He met Pet again, who revealed that this girl had been following their group. Eric's team then woke up with Red Hair ditching the mission to go play and getting scolded. They all decided to head out together, joining Maria, who was also on her way. Suddenly, they found themselves in Anma's room. She revealed that Amma was just a pseudonym, and her true name remained a mystery. She informed the group about an ancient race capable of wielding magic who built cities in the sky. But due to war, everything fell apart, and now history was on the verge of repeating itself. Green Hair had heard enough about the organization and realized they were far from noble. They were instigators of war. Eric had always thought he was part of a justice organization. Suddenly, the group was told not to be shocked, but to steel themselves. Then everyone was transported, and I found myself back in my room. I heard Amma's voice again asking for my help. Remembering past events, I woke fully and met Amma, who revealed she had asked me to save this world. I hesitated, knowing the danger and risk of death, but Amma promised a blessing in return. When I asked her name, she kept it secret, but didn't force me to join. I was free to return to my world if I wished, but the girl's earnest plea made me hesitate, torn between helping and staying safe. I met the Pet again, who explained that this girl had asked it to watch over our group. Eric's group then woke up, and the red-haired one abandoned their mission to go play during Eric's scolding. Together, we went to find Maria, who was also setting out. Suddenly, the whole group arrived at Amma's room. She told Eric that Amma was just an alias, and her real name remained a mystery. Then she shared knowledge about an ancient tribe. With their mastery of magic, they built cities floating high in the sky, but war turned those dreams to ashes. Now war threatens once again. Blue Hair has uncovered the truth from the organization they joined, a faction steeped in chaos and rebellion. Eric had long believed he was part of a just order, but Anma reveals a darker secret. She tried to forge him into a warrior for one side, while summoning another to empower him. hoping to balance the scales between the warring factions. Yet everything has fallen apart. So, Ammar decides to grant power to all urging them to fight and reclaim peace. Eric was chosen for his rare potential. Hearing this shocks him deeply while another can only sneer. And Mar then unveils the magical weapons she prepared for their choosing. At this moment, the other makes his choice. Despite Anmar's tempting offers, he resolves to stay. Back below, everyone sees weapons locked inside a giant box with a lever. They rush forward to pull it, but the other sits lost in thought, doubting his decision. If he goes home, he'll live, but remain a virgin forever. If he stays, death looms. Regret haunts him for never mastering swordsmanship or martial arts properly. Everyone tries with all their might, but cannot budge the lever. The princess summons magic, even lifting a mountain of hair, yet still fails. Then, the other realizes just insert coins and pull the lever. The princess spends a fortune to claim her weapon, giving the leftovers to the group. Eric's group was then teleported back to their original location. The green-haired girl intended to tell Eric something, but time ran out before she could. Eric pondered which side he should align with in battle. While Anne had already found his answer, he would stay and ask the princess to make him a man, though he wasn't thrilled with who would help him. She then teleported the entire group back to their previous position, assuring them that if they needed anything, they could call on her. The next day, they set out for battle, but had to duck and weave to avoid the enemy's bombardment. They never anticipated the enemy would mobilize such a formidable force. Anne believed they needed to find the minister soon, and explained that the incident from the night before was a scheme by the rebels, who had surreptitiously placed a nose hair on him to provoke the princess's ire. Maria was taken aback when she spotted her brother on the battlefield, prompting her to withdraw. Losing her fighting spirit, she prepared to stand against her own country's troops. Just as she stepped forward, her brother appeared, asserting that she should not block their path as this war was unavoidable. The princess's resolve faltered too, forcing everyone to retreat. They needed a plan to deal with the mastermind behind this conflict, but as they engaged in battle, they were quickly surrounded, and she encountered her older brother once more, necessitating another retreat. Seeing everyone lose their morale, he raised his voice, urging them not to dwell on regrets as if death were imminent. He wanted silence, no more pessimism. The longer they hesitated, the quicker the rebels' plan would succeed. They then returned to a tavern to regain their strength before the battle, because ultimately, one must have substance to uphold the spirit. They vowed to prevent the war, and one girl, upon hearing his words, made him promise to stop it. Once outside, he noticed a black cat, thinking it was a sign of bad luck beginning to creep in. Yet, in this case, the black cat symbolized good fortune. It was something else that stuck to his hand that was the real misfortune. When he wiped it on the ground, it became a double dose of bad luck. According to legend, a great hero had fought valiantly, but fell into a trap due to bad luck, losing 800 men. Afterward, he discovered a way to break the curse, but he remained skeptical. Suddenly, a pot nearly fell on his head, making him start to believe. He inquired about how the hero had broken the curse, learning that he needed water to wash his hands, and it had to be poured by a pure woman. Unfortunately, Maria did not fit that criteria. Just then, a large drill came flying towards him. He dodged it, only to have a poisonous spider latch onto his back, biting him and knocking him unconscious. Meanwhile, Eric had called out. As Eric awaited a response from the organization, doubt began to creep into his heart. His trust shattered, he decided to abandon their cause. Suddenly, Blue Hair returned wounded, having battled the organization's new generation of robots. Though he took down a few, the cost was high, he was gravely injured and on the brink of death. But just then, Red Hair appeared and cast a healing spell, restoring him to health. Curiosity buzzed among the group about Red Hair's whereabouts, to which he jokingly claimed he was out drinking. However, Yellow Hair knew the truth. He'd been negotiating child support with his ex-wife, who just so happened to be Yellow Hair's former classmate. Red Hair was puzzled about how Yellow Hair knew his wife, considering she attended an all-girls school. It was then that Yellow Hair confessed to her secret she was actually a girl. Everyone had already caught on, but out of respect, they kept her secret except for Eric, who was completely oblivious and shocked to learn he'd been deceived while growing closer to another girl. Meanwhile, the boy had awakened after being detoxified by Anmar, but his bad luck continued. He was thrust into a bizarre ceremony where he was to be released from a massive water jug and extinguish the flames surrounding him. And Ma, seeing time was running out, broke the jug to help him, although he believed he had accomplished it all by himself. He later asked Anmar why she didn't control the floating city to join the fight, but she was at a loss. Technology here was too primitive. He handed her headphones and a phone, hoping she could integrate it with the sacred weapon for some useful effect. Meanwhile, the king's army and the minister were gathering, preparing for battle, while the boy's group dashed to intervene. Exhausted, he could barely keep up, and suddenly they were intercepted by the organization's artificial warriors. The commander of this group revealed himself looking like a zombie, and spoke of the organization's cold-blooded warriors. The boy paid little attention, only questioning why the commander kept snickering before he gave the order for his troops to get serious. The boy and his team prepared for battle, charging ahead, while Maria and the princess provided covering fire. The destructive force of the trio made him think he might not need to fight at all, but soon he realized the enemy wasn't out to annihilate them, just to hold them off until the real war began. Yet the enemy continued to bring in reinforcements. Just then, Eric's group arrived to assist them. They decided to break away from the organization and operate independently. In a coordinated effort, they successfully eliminated the artificial warriors and their commander. Eric approached the boy and they agreed to fight on the same side until the war was over. The boy accepted, continuously guessing Eric's words, which mildly irritated him. They hopped into a vehicle and raced toward the battlefield. When they arrived, both armies had already clashed, but the boy stood up, demanding a halt to the fighting. He declared that he and those above were warriors of the ancient tribe, a claim met with disbelief. The princess shot down a few tanks to assert their power, but the minister remained unconvinced. So the boy instructed Anmar to take action. She controlled the floating city to hover above the soldiers of both factions. With this display, everyone now believed they were indeed from the ancient tribe and divine beings, causing them to flee in fear of opposing a deity. The minister, abandoned by his soldiers, seethed in frustration, while the king's army also retreated. Plan A was complete, and now Eric aimed to kidnap the king and minister to forge a peace treaty. The rebel organization, on hearing the news of their defeat, learned of Eric's betrayal, but remained undeterred, activating their secret weapon, the ultimate monster. It appeared as a demon, its upper half fearsome, while its lower half was a giant, fluffy creature. He called Anmar for assistance, but even she was at a loss. The boy felt hopeless, believing they were nothing but pests compared to that monster. Nevertheless, Eric and the others charged forward, and he instructed them to aim for its legs. The 5 super soldiers and the princess's group rushed in, shouting their attacks, not that he understood why everyone enjoyed the dramatics. Their flashy efforts yielded little as the beast absorbed their attacks without a scratch. It soon noticed them and attempted to stomp on the group. Missing its target, it resorted to spewing water, creating a deluge. But at that moment, the boy realized what he had to do. He transformed his weapon into a loudspeaker and called out to the monster, questioning its repeated utterance of its name. Did it not know how to converse? Was it merely a massive creature with a tiny brain, letting the rebels command it like a pet? If it was powerful, why not stand up and act on its own? He interrupted its monologue, forcing it to apologize. It then asked him what it must do to atone, and he managed to tame it, leading it to execute his plan. Anmar appeared, revealing that he had an exceptionally high adaptability to magic. She had hoped he would become a warrior upon arrival, but he solved most issues using only his words. The princess recognized Anmar's surprise at his abilities, and the boy then commandeered the minister's vehicle and the king's carriage, bringing them back to his team. The peace treaty was swiftly established. Meanwhile, the rebel leaders were fleeing, but Eric and his team were there to deal with them capturing a stronghold. They then celebrated the calm after the storm, holding a coronation. The main antagonist was forced to wear a collar for life, and the artificial warriors faced execution, while the furry monster was sent to a deserted island. The monster charges, but Eric and his team surge forward. The other advises aiming for its legs. The 5 super brothers and the princess's group joined the fray, shouting out flashy attack names. Why? Because looking cool is half the battle, even if it barely dents the beast. The monster barely flinches, turning its attention toward them. It stomps to crush the group, but misses and retaliates by spitting, turning the ground to a slippery stream. But the other knows what must be done. Transforming his weapon into a megaphone, he calls out to the monster, questioning its endless repetition of its own name. Does it not know how to talk? Is it a mindless brute? Does it just blindly obey its rebel masters like a beast? If it's strong, stand on your own and act. Interrupting it repeatedly, he forces the monster to apologize. When asked how to make amends, he tames it, turning the beast into an ally. They begin to execute their plan. And Ma appears, revealing the other's exceptional magic affinity and high hopes for him as a warrior. Yet he resolves most challenges with words alone. The princess senses Anmar's surprise at his talent. The other then captures the chief's carriage, and the kings, bringing them back to the group. Peace talks quickly follow. Meanwhile, the rebel headquarters scramble to flee, but Eric's team arrives, capturing them all. The king organizes a celebration, signaling the end of turmoil. The ringleader is sentenced to life in chains, the artificial warriors dismantled, and the furry monster sent to live on an island. Though peace seems restored, the others group, and Eric's must still face one last battle. When the other charges to help, Eric's team blocks him. He throws his pet at Eric, prompting a one-on-one duel. Eric's skill prevails, and confidence blooms. He believes he can finally avenge the two children he lost. But Maria steps in, revealing she knows Eric's tragic loss. The truth shocks everyone. Maria chooses to shed her former identity, entrusting her two children to Eric. Though Eric doubts the possibility, and Ma assures them she can make it happen. Everyone wonders why Ma researches such things. Some mysteries remain beyond their understanding. And Ma transfers 2 gems from Maria to Eric. Maria feels relieved while Eric prepares to marry his fiancée. Both sides seem ready to lay down arms, but Eric urges the other to cherish the life Maria saved. The other agrees he's no longer a virgin, as he's about to enjoy Anmar's company. She tells him to let go now, as she'll visit his room later. But the moment he relaxes, she already plots to hold him to his promises. Knowing he must return, he bids farewell. Anmar sends him back, but the princess insists on a proper goodbye. He's brought back again, and she punches him for trying to escape. He tells the princess not to worry, they'll meet again when she's 18. Another slap follows. Still, he encourages her to become a great princess. Alongside Maria and the pet, she'll be protected. Eric's group will guard the world in his stead. The other awakens in his room, initially thinking he fainted from his chair. But Anma's apology on the screen and the sting from the princess's slap prove otherwise.